All right, first things first. Tell me your physical situation, how safe or unsafe you are, the type of place you're in, how far you are away from the windows, all that stuff.
Right. So right now I'm in the center of Kyiv in a hotel, and I guess as safe as I can be. I There is a little bit of shelling tonight, so I moved to the basement for a little while. But other than that, the day's been fairly calm. It's very quiet on the streets. It's a very, very different place to the Kyiv that I was in a couple of weeks ago. It's a drastically transformed sort of situation. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the reports about a Russian convoy that is kind of approaching the city that is believed to be quite extensive. So that is obviously a nerve-wracking component of it as to what point this convoy actually reaches the capital, what their approach
Mhm.
will be. There is a lot of fear that there will be sort of large-scale fighting and artillery and that kind of thing. At this point, it's very hard to know. I spent some of the day, with some of the presidential officials and the top sort of military right in that area downtown in the capital, and the spirits are really good. Ukrainians are optimistic that their sort of a counter offense will work, but again, it's just a situation that is very fluid.
Well, I mean, they are fighting, and you are in the midst of a true Russian siege of a capital city. I mean, we haven't seen this. We I
Yeah.
guess we've seen it in Chechnya and some other plaplaces, but not in
But
modern
not
history.
not in yeah, and it's like incredibly bizarre, Ken. Like little things that you people are finding these very strange sort of markings on rooftops and
Right.
strange markings on roads, and there's sort of this reddish color and with kind of crosshairs,
Hmm.
and basically they're presumed to be planted by sort of Russian mercenaries in the city as target points for artillery and places to bomb. So Ukrainian officials are encouraging anyone who sees something like that to cover it, to try to get rid of it, to sabotage it in some way, because that is seemingly, and that's a throwback from what the German Air Force did in World War II. So it's just this very, very bizarre modern day war, but also huge
Hmm.
aspects of being in some kind of time capsule.
Right. Right. Now, the media right now is in the West is portraying it as the Russians are having a much harder time than they expected. Now, it's tough for us to know how much of that is real, how much of that is coming because the Ukrainians are doing a much better job, certainly at the information warfare. They're using modern day techniques and social media to get their stories out, and you don't see that from Russia. What's your sense of how accurate that and then what you see when you go to the news sites in the West?
So, I mean, my understanding, again, it's very hard to gauge because I haven't seen the Russian soldiers myself. So it is hard to gauge. I think that I think that it definitely you can say that it's sort of been a fairly amateur performance by Russia, which really should be the second most powerful military in the world. And I think what we're sort of seeing is that a lot of conscripts were used to invade, and
Right.
the Kremlin really thought that the capital would just sort of surrender and concede, which obviously has not happened. But the thing with Russia is they've just got endless resources. They have so many more resources. It's a country of
Hmm.
144 million compared
Hmm.
to Ukraine, which is 44 million. They've got Belarus, and they've just got just a massive supply of weaponry and heavy weaponry that the Ukrainians just don't have. So that is going to be a hard match, I think, skill wise. But what I'm sort of seeing so far, and my understanding of the situation, is that a lot of these Russian soldiers really didn't have any idea essentially what they were going
Hmm.
into. A lot thought that they were going to Belarus or going to Crimea to do a training exercise, and then their passports were taken from them, and they were sent sort of into Ukraine in what initially they has assumed to be some other type of training exercise. So you're really seeing kind of and from what I've heard from people in a lot of the villages, especially sort of in the east, are telling me at one point Russian soldiers had sort of occupied a village, and 3 days later they were asking for food and
Hmm.
broke into a grocery store because they just didn't have any supplies. So that sort of shows you a little bit about how maybe disorganized this war is, and maybe how rushed it was. And I think it also speaks to the kind of bizarre state that we're seeing Putin in, and why
Mhm.
now, and why this invasion made any sense to him at all.
Now you were there a couple weeks back. When were you there last in Ukraine?
Right. So I left. I was in Ukraine for a couple of weeks. I arrived, I believe, the last week of January, and
Hmm.
I left. I guess it was 3 weeks.
About
No,
that.
about two and a half weeks ago, I left because my assumption was really that nobody really, I guess, expected this invasion to actually happen.
Well, we had talked, and you had mentioned that you were like,
Yeah.
nobody out here in Ukraine thinks this is happening, and they're questioning the United States and CIA, and don't make
Yeah.
trouble, right? That was almost the
Yeah.
comment.
And yeah, and they were saying to me why, Russian troops have been stationed around our border since April of 2020, April 2021, and why is this kind of a story now? And I think a lot of them were fairly perplexed. I think they were also trying to instill calm in the situation.
Mhm.
They were trying to not ruin their economy, and I guess really hoping for the best. That does make me a little nervous because some of the the same officials I speak to who are lovely people, but they're also very calm about what may unfold in the next sort of few days, and are basically saying, we've got this, and not to undermine that they don't have it, but I do
Mhm.
have to question how much they're sort of putting on a brave face, or
Right.
really just a little bit, I don't want to say naive, but not trying to put forward the
Right.
notion that something very serious could unfold.
Well, you can be optimistic or you can be pessimistic, but you're still in the middle of a war, and so it's like
Yes.
you gotta fight it. So look, the big fear for the country and me for you is the notion that as Russia has a harder time with this, it stops being relatively restrained. In other words, we haven't seen carpet bombing of cities. We haven't seen a lot of things that Putin has done in other parts of the world a number of years ago. We haven't seen that yet. Is that a fear that you have, and is that a fear that you're sensing out among just regular people?
I think, well, Ukrainians never expected this war. I haven't sort of heard anyone say that they're outright concerned of a
Right.
total carpet bombing, but I'm sure that fear is there. And it's something, me as a war journalist has to factor into the decision making that I do. But as Putin has been fairly restrained, we are seeing a bit more of an uptick of civilian areas being targeted in
Mm-hmm.
Kharkiv, which is the second largest city of Kyiv, which Putin sort of started to assault at the end of last week, and that seems to be ongoing. So whether he's going to try to take a more restrained approach if and when the Russian troops come to Kyiv, or if he just is going to get frustrated at this point and just kind of go for it. So
Mm-hmm.
he just seems to be in a precarious mental state, and it's not a war he definitely is going to lose easily, irrespective of what happens. The end game is very unclear to me, because for if he even was to win, there is no way that Ukrainians are going to accept some kind of pro-Putin puppet government. That wouldn't last a day before some sort of giant revolution happened there. So I don't know what Putin's end game in this. I don't know why he thinks he can take over a city and just suddenly have control
Mm-hmm.
over it. And as you see now, he's in massive domestic trouble. Russia has been absolutely leveled with sanctions from many directions. Their airlines cannot fly into Europe, many countries in Europe, as well as the United States. Banks, the oligarchs are now being isolated. Just every possible, you've got big tech that's pulling out. So Russian people are really going to suffer as a result of this, regardless of what happens in Ukraine. So I just can't imagine what his end game in this is. And I think everybody's sort of scratching their heads.
Well, prior to this, a lot of people, I think, expected it to be a little bit like Crimea. In other words, with Crimea, you were like, you know what? A lot of them want to be there, right? And you could say probably the same for the eastern parts of Ukraine. A couple of those provinces wouldn't mind being part of Russia because they're primarily Russian. And everybody just kind of shrugged their shoulders. The world didn't go crazy. But two things in this war have happened so far. One is the Ukrainians fought back in a way that nobody expected. I mean, you were in Kabul. We'll talk about Kabul in a second, because wherever you go, bad things happen. They fought back a lot harder than expected, and a lot of people thought this would be over in a day or two, like it has been in other things. The other is President Zelensky. He's become a little bit of a worldwide hero. I mean, the guy is good looking, a stud, part of his, being a leader and a heroic leader at a time of where, he might end up dead very, very shortly. But it is rare to see that kind of bravery and the ability to rouse a country like that was very, very impressive. Do
Yeah.
you sense that? I mean, the guy went from a comedian
Yeah.
to a pretty popular president, and now he's kind of a little bit of a superstar there. Or
Yeah,
here.
he absolutely is a rock star, and I think Ukrainians are just incredibly proud of him. Even ones that really didn't support him, or will even tell me I didn't vote for him, but they're just incredibly proud of the stance that he's taken, the fact that he won't leave, and I can attest sort of that he is certainly in Kyiv right now, and yeah, he's rallied people together. He has sort of taken risks with his approach. He's basically put the onus on Ukrainians and every single citizen to fight, and that is really something that he's brought Ukrainians together in a way that nobody really thought was possible,
Mm-hmm.
and right down to the encouraging everybody to the grandmas to make Molotov cocktails and
Right,
just
which they're
throw them at
doing.
Russian,
Right.
which they are doing, and
Mm-hmm.
Russia, I mean Ukrainians have really really taken this in their stride, and someone one person said to me today, an artist, and he said he's a volunteer medic, and he said, I wasn't even in Kyiv when the invasion started a week ago. I was just outside the city, and he said, so I, came back sort of a day later, and he just said, I can't believe how quickly I've adjusted to this situation, how
Interesting.
quickly the sound of shelling has become normal, how the streets are empty, how we're stopped at every checkpoint, and he's sort of driving medics around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's they've really just come together in an incredible way to fight for their country. And the fact even enacting martial law straight away and stopping 18 to 60-year-old men from exiting the country is something that I think what really was something that needed to happen. We need as many boots on the ground as possible, and even my driver yesterday, a wonderful young woman, I call her my angel, and she sort of said to me, she's single, and she said, when I start dating again, when this war is over, she said, I'm going to ask any guy I date where he was during this time, because that will make a big difference to me. If he's someone who's trying to get out of the country still, and there certainly are men that are still trying to get out or dual citizens, but she said, it matters to me where they are at this time and what they're doing for Ukraine.
Yeah, you'd rather have the guy who doesn't run out the door when something like that happens. So usually I can look at a globe, a map of a globe, and wherever the most screwed up part of the world is, Hollie McKay is there. So you were literally just months ago in Kabul were you in Kabul or were you in another city? You were in Afghanistan.
So
Afghanistan.
I was even worse. So I went to the north to Mazar Sharif,
Right.
and so I was the only foreigner in there as it fell, and that was the day before Kabul. So I had to kind of wait it out a little bit there. Alone with the Taliban until I could get back to Kabul.
Okay, and then so you go down to Ukraine, you go home for a little bit, and then how on earth did you get back in the middle of a war zone, in the middle of a war?
Well, and this is another point that I'll make just on we're sort of seeing a lot of news reports in the past few days, and a lot of this was coming from Kyiv officials too, that the city was completely besieged.
Mm-hmm.
There was no way to get in. And when I'd said to people that I wanted to get in, and I had one friend who said, oh, I'm in touch with the top levels of the United States government intelligence, and they said there's absolutely no way that anyone is getting in or out of Kyiv. And I just thought, oh, I'll find a way. So I had no concept of what I was doing. So when the invasion started, I thought, I can't sit it out. It just felt like such an important story. And this was happening in Europe. And I'd already invested so much time. So I thought, I have to figure it out. So I flew to Budapest in Hungary. And then I had a random sort of follower on Instagram, really, who had been chatting to me for the past couple of months, just a young guy who ran sort of security. He'd said, if you ever need anything in Budapest, let me know. And he happened to message me that day. And I said, look, I'm flying to Budapest to try to get to Ukraine. And he said, well, you're welcome to stay at, I live with my girlfriend and sister. You're welcome to stay at our apartment if you need it. So I said, great, fine. So I went to Budapest, these lovely random young Hungarians took me in, and then the next day he drove me down to the border, and we took a bunch of supplies for the
Hmm.
refugees, Ukrainian refugees fleeing, and we went to this
Hmm.
tiny little border village. And honestly, I didn't know anybody. He had to go back to Budapest, and so I went to a church, and through the language barrier, they were just the loveliest people, and they gave me the church office to sleep in that night as I was kind
Hmm.
of making plans of how I was going to get in. Through a contact of a contact of a contact, I said, "Look, I'm trying to get into Kyiv, and I don't know anyone right there that can drive me because it's a long distance." And by some sort of angel, this lovely girl called me, and she said, "I can pick you up at 10 a.m. from the border tomorrow, if you're ready to go." And I just thought, I don't know. But I said, "How long is it going to take us to get to Kyiv?" And she said, "Well, normally 8 hours, but we're not taking any highways because they're all dangerous and the bridges are broken.
Hmm.
So we're just going to take little back roads, and it'll take about 20 hours." And I thought, okay, I'm just going to do it. So I walked over the Hungarian border into Ukraine, and the lovely people were there to meet me. And she was just sort of a calm angel who just was like, "Oh, welcome. We're going to have a nice road trip." And so we basically drove through the night. It was it was 20 hours. We didn't stop. We took back roads, and obviously because there is curfew, that was a little bit dangerous because we didn't want our car to be shot at. So
Hmm.
you sort of have to drive with very low lights, and it's snowing, and there were just so many checkpoints. So just I think I lost count after a while, but I was counting for a while, and I got to almost 40. So what happens? You get to a checkpoint in the night, and you just sort of see a flash of light. Someone would wave a light, and then it would go off, and so you would just turn the interior of the car on so that they could see
Hmm.
you, and just stop, and then they would instruct you to kind of move forward and check your passports and things like that. And I say it's the first time that I found it much easier to be a woman in a war zone.
Oh,
Normally
interesting.
not,
Right.
but because we were women in the car, so we weren't sort of double checked. We weren't really seen as threatening, and because we were taking medical supplies to some of the
I
volunteer
see.
fighters, so
I see.
I think they appreciated that. But eventually, we got into Kyiv, and that was early morning yesterday, my time. So I had a little bit of a nap at her apartment just outside the city. And then I started to get concerned. I needed to get into the city before any closures sort of happened. So basically called a cab. Cab took me to my normal hotel that I stay in Kyiv. And then I set up and got the ground running today with interviews sort of all over the city before curfew at 5 p.m.
Now, why was the Thelma of Thelma and Louise part? Why was she coming into the two nutty gals driving at mid anyhow? Why was she going down?
She's, as I said, she's just an angel of a human being.
Wow.
She is just going back and forth, driving across the country, back and forth, taking supplies. So
I see.
because there are no medicines in Kyiv, everything is closed. There's sort of not a
Hmm.
lot coming in and out. So she will drive to the western part of the country where there are still things operating, pick up medicines. She'll also go to the border because her and sort of a group of volunteers on Facebook, really, getting donations and to buy medical supplies and things that
Hmm.
a lot of the volunteers need. I know things like body armor they're really trying to get, but that is a little bit difficult. So
Right.
they're going to, the Polish border or the Romanian border and organizing to pick up supplies and then bring them and distribute them back to Kyiv. So basically, she was on the road again today, also helping evacuate people. So she's
Hmm.
taking a lot of the elderly
Wow.
people and people with pets and taking them to some of the border areas as well. So who are very scared or scared to get on trains and things. So Ukrainians have come together in just the most amazing way, and people are just so incredibly giving. And I could also say that for the Hungarians that I saw, just people
Hmm.
donating whatever they possibly could, giving cash, giving food, giving money. It's given me so much faith in humanity that I think I lost for a while. And that's what I always say about war is it really is the worst of people, but it is the best of people too. And you see how people come together and it just is so generous and so giving and throughout the difficult times. And it's really inspiring to see.
You have no way to get out though, right? What?
Well, I have a rough exit plan, but
Right.
that can change in
That
an
changes.
hour.
Are, are
Um,
are you
yeah.
surprised? Are you surprised that you have electricity, you have internet, you made a phone call to get the cab. That
Yep.
stuff's still going. Is that a little surprising to
It's
you?
very I mean, it's a bit limited, but I mean,
Uh-huh.
certainly I have good Wi-Fi where I am. I'm in a hotel and they give us great food and there's beer in the fridge and things like that. I don't know how much supply there is. I don't
Right.
know when that kind of runs out.
Right.
But yeah, but right now, the water is running hot and I have my electricity and things feel I feel like I'm, in a stable place, able to work, even though it is certainly a war zone outside. But I don't know how long the supplies last, but I'm going to take advantage of it while I have it. But yeah, mostly the cabs and things aren't running, but there
Right.
are sort of a few exceptions, and there are very few cars on the road.
Now,
People are still somehow trying to make ends meet.
finally, what are your plans for tomorrow? Can you get out of it during the day?
Yeah,
Obviously, that
I got
depends
out.
on
Yeah,
what kind of action's
yeah.
going on outside.
Yeah, so I spent a good part of the day. I There's a bit of drama. So I don't know, wasn't gonna go into it, but I ended up getting a really bad second-degree burn on my legs and stomach last night. So that was really in my room and I boiled water and for some reason the cups in the room, the lid doesn't fit. And so when I went to drink this scalding thing,
Uh,
it fell
uh,
all,
uh,
and I have a very, very bad burn. But I not dwelling on it. But luckily, so this is the beauty of not just sort of coming to a place when it's in the middle of a war, but having
mhm.
some contacts and experience. So I have good friends of mine that have a volunteer mobile hospital. So when I woke up this morning and I saw that this wasn't just a scalding burn, this was
Right.
definitely much more serious. I called them and they just sort of took me in, were amazing, just kept continuing to dress it all day. So I sort of went out, spent a lot of my day kind of based out of their base downtown where they're treating people. And from there, I went to the downtown presidential area and we're interviewing some of my contacts there that are pretty high up in the
Mhm.
military, and then was kind of traveling around. And one thing I did is I went to some churches. Now, churches are really mostly closed, but I was able to make some calls and to speak to some of the archbishops and priests, and I really just wanted to understand because Ukraine is very much a country founded on the Orthodox Church, and it's a country where faith is very strong. And so I wanted to really understand the church's role in all of this and what they
Mhm.
were doing to prepare and kind of what their message in all of this
Hmm.
is,
Hmm.
because there is a big schism between um, Kyiv and Moscow Orthodox churches. There was a big split that happened in 2019. So to me, that was sort of an interesting take, just to also get a snippet of what is happening in all aspects of Kiev life right now. And yeah, it's been kind of a fascinating day of just hearing people's opinions and how they're preparing and what they think. And tomorrow I will continue with a lot of that, probably start my day with getting medical treatment myself, which I hate. And I hate taking away resources in a time like this. But the joke is that I don't have to be worried about the Russians because I have to be worried about exploding coffee cups. Yeah, so my plan is to sort of continue with a lot of that and um, just yeah, really documenting everyday life to people in a
Right.
way that people can hopefully kind of understand what's happening um, without sort of the how do you say it? Giving them a little bit more than a soundbite from a hotel rooftop. So
Got it.
that's
Got
really
it.
what I'm trying to do, and without sort of some of the breathless, dramatic reporting that I've seen. And it's not to say that it isn't a precarious situation. I just don't know that it necessarily does us any favors if the reporter themselves is sort of fearful and scared. So I'm just trying to kind of be the layman, really.
Okay. All right. Well, you scare the crap out of all your friends and people who like you,
Like him.
even though we've been in the business and I've watched you be from a former ballerina to an entertainment reporter for Fox News to
Yeah.
a wartime reporter who's seen a lot of both scary and I think uplifting stuff. And so take care of yourself or we will hurt you. And any other things that you can think to close it up, or You got to get.
No, I just think, well, let's keep an eye on it. The situation's obviously changing,
Okay.
and yeah, just be aware that, and I saw this in Afghanistan too, and just be really aware that as we could sort of see with the Snake Island incident where everyone said, oh, these 13 men were martyred, when that really wasn't the case. And obviously there was a nugget of truth in that story that they
Right.
were bombarded by a Russian warship. But I just think I saw this so much in Afghanistan, was just the perpetuation of doctored photos and
Hmm.
misleading headlines. And you see that not just from the Russians, which we all know Russians are notorious for that kind of chaos, but you also see it from the Ukrainian side too, and sort of
Hmm.
drumming up that propaganda. And just sort of approach it, I guess, with a bit of a cautious eye. And I
Right.
know that there are many different elements at play. And if you can't verify it, then it's or it sounds too good to be true. It probably is.
You have your windows taped up?
Yes,
Okay.
everything is secure as it can be.
Screws it could be minus the hot water. I'm sorry to hear
Yeah.
that. All right, you take care of yourself. First sound of rumbling around there, the basement is a good place to be. And
Yeah.
ping me. We'll talk longer when you are out of danger, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
I look forward to it. Thank you for your support.
All right, Holly. You take care.